What's the best way to wrap your ribs? In today's Smoke Lab, I'm testing out some crazy creative ways to wrap ribs, like soybean wrapper, which is usually used for spring rolls, and even plastic wrap, alongside the classics aluminum foil, butcher paper, and the foil pan method. Will these creative methods give us perfect ribs or be a complete failure? We're gonna find out in this video, so let's get smoking. I'm starting with 7 racks of ribs, 2 baby backs that I'll smoke completely unwrapped the entire time, and 5 spare ribs that I'll wrap in various ways. All of these ribs are left over from a recent barbecue competition I competed in. I'm opening up the cryovac bags, scoring the membrane on the back, and seasoning both sides with my Smoke Trails BBQ Let's Go general purpose rub, followed by a final layer of kosher salt for a little bit of extra pop of flavor. Look at those ribs, they're already looking fantastic. Out on my Oklahoma Joe's Longhorn offset smoker today, I ran out of charcoal, so we're going to use all wood for this run. I'm stacking up some wood splits in the fire basket, hitting them with a propane torch and getting that fire rolling. I'll be running steady at around 250 degrees Fahrenheit for the start of this cook. I've got a lot of ribs, so I'm using a competition trick I used at Memphis in May a few years ago. I put a few racks of ribs on the bottom grate of the Longhorn, then I placed some elevated cookie cooling racks on top of them to create a second layer, almost like an upper shelf. It's a really cheap way to double your cooking space without paying to install a second rack, or using rib racks, which I don't really like because they stand the ribs on their side. Now, every hour or so, I open up the smoker and rotate the ribs top to bottom and front to back to keep everything cooking evenly. The top obviously runs and cooks a lot hotter, so this helps even things out. About 5 hours in, our ribs are sitting around 165 degrees internal with some beautiful color and set bark, so it's time to wrap. Let's start with Oklahoma Joe's butcher paper, a little glaze on the paper, then the ribs go meat side down, more glaze on top, and I wrap them up tight. Theoretically, the butcher paper should help the ribs cook faster, but preserve some of the bark because it allows some of the steam to escape. Next, aluminum foil. This is the classic method I use in barbecue competitions and my backyard ribs. For ribs, glaze goes down, then the meat side goes down, more glaze on top of the ribs, then foiled up and sealed, but I like to kind of scrunch it up so that I can easily unroll it and peek in and check for doneness during the cook, then easily seal it up again. Now here's where things get weird. This is soybean wrapper or spring roll wrapper. You can get it at Asian supermarkets. It's basically a dehydrated sheet of soybeans used for making spring rolls and other Asian cuisine. I'm layering 3 sheets, adding some glaze to them, and then wrapping the ribs up, basically like edible butcher paper. It sticks surprisingly well to the ribs, which is a good sign. Next up, something that admittedly sounds insane, plastic wrap. I'm wrapping these ribs several times in cling wrap film, then covering that in foil. Now, before you call the police on me, this actually isn't as crazy as it seems. Plastic wrap does not melt until at least 220 degrees Fahrenheit for the cheapest plastic wrap you can possibly buy. A lot of thicker plastic wrap out there actually has a higher melting point. But importantly, if your plastic wrap is in contact with water, or in this case, moist meat that has a lot of juices and water in it, then that water and moisture is going to wick all of the heat from the smoker away from the plastic wrap so that it never gets above the boiling point of water, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. For this to work, the plastic wrap has to be in contact with something moist at all times, and I also double wrap it with aluminum foil on the outside to help protect it from the heat of the smoker as well. So thermodynamically speaking, it should be fine. The plastic should not melt as long as it's in contact with moist meat, but is it leaching BPAs or microplastics or other undesirable things in the plastic into your meat? Maybe, maybe not. If you're uncomfortable with the risk, then just use butcher paper. Finally, the foil pan method. Ribs go in with the glaze meat side down. You can go meat side up if you want to preserve the bark a little bit more. Foil lid scrunched up on top tightly. This one is great for convenience, though it takes up a lot more smoker space. Loading everything back into the Longhorn, the foil pan definitely hogs up a lot of space, but we'll make it fit. Running the pit now at 275 degrees Fahrenheit until everything probes tender. 2 hours later, everything's looking amazing. The spring roll wrapper has crisped up beautifully and those unwrapped ribs look incredible. Internal temps are around 195 to 203 Fahrenheit. Foil wrapped ribs finished the fastest, no surprise there. Now let's double check the tenderness on all these ribs. They are all pretty tender. The foil wrapped ribs are definitely done. They cooked the fastest. The butcher paper ribs probably needed a little bit more time, as did the unwrapped ribs, but these are good enough, so it's time for the taste test. But before we wrap up, November is here and it's all about honoring our currently serving military members and veterans for Veterans Day in the US and Remembrance Day here in Canada. I served with the Canadian Armed Forces in Afghanistan in 2008 during the War on Terror, and we worked shoulder to shoulder with our American brothers and sisters in arms. So I just want to take a moment to salute all of our serving members and veterans, both in the US and Canada, for their courage, their sacrifice, and their service. From one veteran to another, thank you for your service. Let's get to the taste test. Okay guys, the last question before the taste test is, do we start with the craziest method first, or do we start with the most common method, like the foil and butcher paper wrap? Let me think about that for a second. Let's start with the craziest one. I'm feeling kind of crazy today. And the craziest one, in my opinion, is the spring roll wrap. I'm really interested to see what this is gonna turn out like. Okay. It's very crispy. It's almost like a giant spring roll. This would actually be cool to wrap a brisket in and just slice it like a giant briskety spring roll. Okay, looking good so far. It's actually kind of just like plastic. I mean, it is a biological material. It's just made out of soy beans, but dang guys, that worked pretty well. This thing's looking done. It doesn't have any residue attached to it. Looking like some pretty good ribs. It is kind of messy though, I will say that. Let's dump out some of that sauce. I guess you could eat this if you really wanted to. Let's take a bite. Not very good. Just basically tastes like spring roll wrapper, I guess. Not that it's bad. I think it's better when it's fried up. Okay, let's cut this guy up. Slicing very nicely. Nice and juicy. That's actually a really good rib. It took on a little bit of the soybean wrapper flavor, but you can barely notice it. I don't think people would notice what that flavor is unless you told them. So, can you wrap in spring roll soybean wrapper? Yes, you can. It actually works pretty well. Okay, moving on to the plastic wrap. This one is very interesting. I was kind of worried about this because I thought the plastic might melt to the ribs, but it hasn't melted at all, probably because there's so much moisture in contact with it. All that H2O really absorbs all of the heat from the smoker, and it ensures that it never gets to the melting point of the plastic. As long as it's in contact with that moisture, I think you're gonna be safe. And I also think that covering it in foil is another way to ensure that. Lots of liquid in here. Ooh, this is kind of fall off the bone. So this one, I would say, cooked a lot faster than the other ones, just by looking at it. There's a lot more liquid in here, and these are almost fall off the bone. This one just came right out on the end. Let's slice off a couple here. These might actually be perfect. That one at the very end might have been a little bit overdone, but the ones in the middle might actually be really good. Okay, take a look at that. That's the juiciest one so far in this video. Super juicy. Very good. That's a good rib. That's about as juicy as they come. No plastic taste, which is good. So, can you wrap in plastic wrap? Yes, you can, and it works really good. Moving on to pan wrapping. Let's take a look at this one. This one actually looks really nice. It kept all of the beautiful color, probably because in the pan, it wasn't fully submerged in all of the juices. It had a little bit of air space. So I think it preserved the bark a little bit more, but the bark is softened quite a bit. Let's make some slices. This one, again, is super juicy, and I can tell I'm gonna like the texture on this. Oh yeah. That just pretty much fell right off the bone, but there is still some structure left to it. That's how I like my ribs, super juicy. The pan allowed it to cook a lot faster than the other methods, which is something to keep in mind, and it did preserve more of the bark than the last two methods I tested. So can you wrap in an aluminum pan? Of course you can. Can you wrap in aluminum foil? Obviously. These look pretty nice. The bark does look a little bit washed out though, as per usual with the foil wrapping method. Once again, super juicy, very good. I always wrap in foil. It does dissolve the bark a little bit though. Now moving on to the butcher paper wrapped ribs. Another traditional way of wrapping ribs. These look pretty good as well. The bark isn't as washed off as the foil wrapped ribs. They smell a little bit smokier actually, and perhaps that's because the butcher paper allows some smoke to penetrate into the actual meat, whereas the foil would just block it right off. So there's a butcher paper wrapped rib right there. Pretty juicy, a little bit drier than the other ones. Very good, juicy. The other ones were juicier, and these probably could have used a bit more time, and that's pretty much par for the course. For what I find with butcher paper is that it typically takes a little bit longer to cook, because with foil, you are trapping more steam and you're cooking the meat faster. So just keep that in mind. Butcher paper usually takes a little bit longer to cook. A little bit smokier though, and a little bit better bark. And finally, the unwrapped ribs. These are baby backs, so not a great comparison because we use spares for the other ones. But it's just a way of comparing what the bark could look like if you don't wrap at all. And that looks really, really nice. It smells really smoky. Could have used some more time. That's the disadvantage with not wrapping. It takes a lot longer, but I think with another 30 minutes, this would have been perfect. As it stands right now, I could still eat it though. It is a lot smokier, the bark's a lot better, but unfortunately, it's a little bit drier. So in conclusion, all of the methods we tested in this video, they're actually viable. They actually work. And to be honest, my favorite rack of ribs was the one that was wrapped in plastic. Whether you're worried about plastic potentially leaching into your meat, I don't know if that actually happens at these low temperatures. We did cover it in foil. It was in contact with water the whole time, so we knew that it didn't get above 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So I don't know if we have any of those concerns, but if you're concerned about it, use something more natural like butcher paper. You still get a really good result. And if you want to go really natural and get results that are similar to the plastic wrap, you could even wrap in the soybean paper, which is all natural. It's just made of beans. Personally, I thought a good middle ground between losing a lot of bark with the plastic wrapped ribs and retaining a lot of bark with both the unwrapped ribs and the butcher paper wrapped ribs was the foil wrapped ribs. And that's why I will continue to do foil wrapped ribs. It's just very easy. Aluminum foil is easy to use, easy to handle, it's cheap, it's easy to obtain, but it's really up to you guys, and I hope you'll keep experimenting with different methods to wrap your ribs. Don't forget to subscribe to the Oklahoma Joe's YouTube channel, and until next time, happy smoking.